It's the damn one and only debate between Colin Allred and Ted Cruz. This is the most heated Senate race that we've got going this year. Internals show Cruz losing right now. I thought that Cruz was ahead by 1 point, but like only 1 point, you know? Is the debate going to be copyright? No way. No way a fucking senatorial debate is being copyright ID'd.
Colin Allred and Ted Cruz in the Texas debate.
Tonight, we are 3 weeks away from the November election, and over the next hour here, we want to help you get more familiar with the two men whose names you will see at the...
What the fuck is this Memento Mori-ass music? What is it called? The game where you walk around the ghost ship? You know what I'm talking about? Return of the Obra Dinn, yeah. Saw right-wingers claiming Kamala's gonna deport Ted Cruz to Canada if she wins. God, I hope so. This is the best shot at keeping the Senate. I mean, it would be really, really nice if we won this, because I'm sure you guys have considered this, but if we lose the Senate and the presidency, the Republicans have complete control over all three branches of government. Like, they'll get rid of the... whatever it's called. I can't think right now. They'll get rid of the thing in the Senate. Filibuster. They'll get rid of the filibuster. They'll do anything they want.
Gentlemen, thank you each for being here tonight. Mr. Allred, you won the coin toss for the opening introduction to go first. You chose to go first.
God favors him.
You have 60 seconds, sir. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you all for moderating, and Senator Cruz, thank you for joining. I'm Colin Allred. I'm a fourth-generation Texan. I'm a husband and a father. I was raised here in Dallas by a single mom who's a public school teacher.
This is the guy who doesn't believe in no crazy ideas like men and women's sports.
My grandfather was a customs officer in Brownsville. That's where my mom and Nat were born and raised, where I spent a lot of my childhood. I was captain of the Baylor football team in Waco, trained for the NFL draft in Houston, and I've served my hometown in Dallas in Congress for the last 6 years. In that time, I've been the most bipartisan Texan in Congress. I'm the exact opposite of Senator Cruz, who's the most extreme senator in the United States Senate, maybe the most extreme in the last 30 years. But that's not enough. He's also only focused on himself. That's how you can go to Cancun when millions of Texans need you and hundreds are dying.
That was wild.
We don't have
I still can't believe he did that. And then blamed his daughter.
That's what this election is all about. That's what I'm asking Texans to give me a chance to do.
Senator, you have 60 seconds for your opening statement.
Thank you, Gromer. Thank you, Jason. Thank you to everyone at home listening.
Ooh, he's putting on the draw.
Texas is an incredible place. I'm the son of an immigrant who came from Cuba with nothing, penniless, washed dishes making 50 cents an hour, but came to Texas to seek out the American dream. And Colin Allred is the son of a single mom who became a football star. He went on to Baylor, went on to the NFL. Now he's a United States congressman. It is incredible that both Congressman Allred and I have the great privilege of representing the people of Texas in the United States Congress. Tonight, I'm going to ask you to listen very carefully to the difference between words and actions. Colin Allred is going to try to say an awful lot of words that sound reasonable. But what he's not going to talk about is his own record or my record.
Look at how ugly that pocket square is.
And I'm over and over again going to take us back to actual records.
He just folded a fucking square. It's like a napkin in his damn pocket.
We're doing an awful lot right in the state of Texas. Colin Allred wants to change that. I want to keep Texas, Texas.
Senator, that is your time. We do want to begin the debate tonight with two big issues that are personal to Texans. Senator, the first question is for you. Texas has one of the strictest abortion bans in the United States. There's no exception for rape or for incest, as you know. In 2021, you co-sponsored a bill in Congress that included those exceptions. But a year later, when the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, you said that you agree with the Texas law that has 0 exceptions. So tonight, the question is, where do you stand on this? And we're asking for your personal opinion as a Texan and as a father.
Well, listen, abortion is an issue that many Texans, many Americans care deeply about. And it's an issue that people of good faith can disagree. People are genuinely and deeply pro-life. People are genuinely and deeply pro-choice. And there are all sorts of positions in between. I agree with the United States Supreme Court that under our Constitution, the way we resolve questions like that, questions on which we have real and genuine disagreements, is at the ballot box.
Not answering the question.
And that's why the state of the law now is that the legislature in Austin sets the laws in Texas. You wouldn't expect Texas's laws to be the same as California. You wouldn't expect Alabama to be the same as New York. I will say, though, in Texas, on the question of abortion, there are a lot of areas we disagree, but there's also a lot of consensus. In Texas, we overwhelmingly support that parents should be notified and have to consent before their child gets an abortion. In Texas, we overwhelmingly agree that late-term abortions in the 8th and 9th months, that's too extreme. And I'll tell you, in Texas, we overwhelmingly agree that taxpayer money shouldn't pay for abortions.
I don't think you do.
Unfortunately, Congressman Allred's voting record rejects that Texas consensus. He has voted in favor of striking down Texas's law that gives parents the right to be notified and consent. He's voted in favor of striking down Texas's law and legalizing.
Just have to say, I like the implication, by the way, that it's like a common sense, normal thing to say, oh, that 13-year-old girl who was raped should be able to get an abortion, but only if her father allows it. What the f*** are you talking about? How on earth is that like a component of the decision? I mean, the father's probably the dad, you know. Ted Cruz we're talking about here.
Abortion up to and including the 8th and 9th month of pregnancy. That's extreme, and it's not where the people of Texas are.
Senator, that's your time. Congressman, 90
Notice how he
seconds
didn't answer the question.
It's time to finally tell the truth here. Senator Cruz just looked into a camera and lied to Texans about my position. Let's be very clear. You should look into the camera and speak to Kate Cox, who's watching right now, and explain to her why you said that this law that you said is perfectly reasonable, why she was forced to leave her 2 children behind and flee our state to get the care that she needed. Or look into the camera and talk to Amanda Zarowski, who's watching right now, and explain to her why it's perfectly reasonable that because she had a complication in her pregnancy and was denied care so long that she may never be able to have children of her own. Or to the 26,000 Texas women who've been forced to give birth to their rapist child.
Isn't it true that the most likely person to sexually assault an underage girl is her father? Depends on whether the father is a Republican, but yeah.
Called perfectly reasonable. It's not. This is not freedom. I trust Texas women to make their own healthcare decisions. You know, Allie and I have had 2 baby boys here in Dallas in the last 5 years. You're scared the entire time. You don't know what they're going to say. But I can't
also, if Colin had like the edge, he would attack Ted Cruz right now for not answering the question. You have to call out. No one ever calls out when their opponent dodges. It's so weird because everyone like prepares their statements so much. No one is ever like, oh, wait, hold on a second. That guy completely dodged it. Like, let me dig into him for it, you know?
Imagine if the doctor would come in, said there's a problem with the baby or a problem with Allie, but there's nothing I can do because Ted Cruz thinks he knows better. That's not who we are as Texans. When I'm in the United States Senate, we'll restore a woman's right to choose. We'll make Roe v. Wade the law of the land again. And we'll make these stories of seeing these horrific experiences going on all over our state something of the past.
Who's got the better fit?
Congressman, thank you. Senator, you did not directly answer the question.
Ted Cruz,
to you again.
marginally.
Do you support or oppose exceptions for rape or for incest? Again, asking as
he's following up.
a father tonight.
So I want to be very clear. If you listen
to very clear. Let me not answer the question.
At no point did he make any reference to his own record. He desperately wants to
he's
hide
calling
from the
out
fact that as a congressman, he voted to strike down Texas's parental notification law. He voted to strike down Texas's parental consent law. He voted to legalize late-term abortions, including the 8th and 9th months. He says he wants to codify Roe versus Wade, but that's not what he voted for. And I'll tell you what,
notice how
tonight I suspect he's going to run away from his record on a whole lot of issues. We have a website. It's called allredfacts.com. Allredfacts.com. Every time he gives an answer, just click on allredfacts.com, and we'll show you the exact vote he cast. Now, as for what the law should be in Texas, that's a decision that will be made by the state legislature.
So you know,
Congressman Allred is running all sorts of ads saying that I made this decision. I don't serve in the state legislature. I'm not the governor. The folks that make the laws here are the state legislature and the governor. He knows that. But he's trying to deceive the voters of Texas.
I want to jump in here because I think it's too important.
It's actually unfair to ask him what his opinion is on this subject.
I support the protections and the restrictions under Roe. But Senator Cruz just called himself pro-life. You're not. You're not pro-life. It's not pro-life to deny women care so long that they can't have children anymore. It's not pro-life to force a victim of rape to carry their rapist's baby. It's not pro-life that our maternal mortality rate has skyrocketed up by 56%. That's not pro-life, Senator. So to every Texas woman at home and to every Texas family watching this, understand that when Ted Cruz says he's pro-life, he doesn't mean yours.
Senator, I want to give you 60 seconds. I want to ask you again, why is this an issue you want to address about saying whether you support or oppose exceptions like rape?
Jason, I'm curious. Why do you keep asking me that? But yet, hold on a second. I've asked Congressman Allred twice about his voting.
I have answered this question. I have no intention of answering it.
Parental notification law and parental consent law. You haven't asked him about that. That is his record. He doesn't deny it. He gives language that is disconnected from the actual voting record he has. And listen, my view, I believe in democracy. If Congressman Allred does not like the decisions that the state legislature has made, if he doesn't like the decisions the governor has made, then he is welcome to run for state legislature or run for governor. But in Congress, neither one of us have a vote. I have not voted to strike down Texas's law. Congressman Allred has.
You're running for U.S. Senate.
To tell you,
your
a mother
opinion
at home,
is relevant.
You
it
have
determines
no
what you'll
right
vote
to
for.
know if your daughter's getting an abortion. That's an extreme position, and I can tell you the overwhelming majority of
This is genuinely crazy to me. I know I'm not a father or whatever, but to me, in my mind, the idea of like, here's something that's really important. A father should know when his daughter's having an abortion. Why? Like, my first order question here is like, wait, abortion? Well, like, how am I like the relevant input on that in that circumstance? Yeah, what? So I can like beat them? Like, what's the? I don't understand at all. It's my kids or my property bullshit. Yeah. Republicans love to pull back to this.
Texans do not agree with Congressman Allred's extreme position against parental rights, against the rights of a mom and dad to be with their daughter in a horrific and challenging time.
Senator, let's move on to another topic.
Let's turn to border security. Congressman, this next question is for you. In 2018, you called Trump's proposal to expand the border wall racist. You said, my generation will be the one that tears it down. But last year, you said you supported President Biden's plan to expand the border wall.
And now we see the consequences of Democrats shifting far right on immigration. Rather than continuing to oppose the right-wing narrative, they instead acquiesce to it as soon as they're in power. And oops, now you all look like fucking hypocrites.
Congressman, why the change in position?
Listen, thank you for the question. This is personal for me. My family's from Brownsville. My grandfather was a customs officer there. He joined the Customs Department in 1939. It's where my mom and my aunt were born and raised and where I spent a lot of my childhood. And I know that our border communities are real places where folks are trying to raise their families and get ahead. But time and again, Senator Cruz treats our border communities like he's going on some kind of a safari. He comes down, he puts on his outdoor clothes, he tries to look tough, and he goes back to Washington and does nothing to help. In fact, he does worse than nothing. When the toughest border security bill in a generation came up in the United States Senate, $20 billion for border security, he said, we don't need a border bill. That's what he said. And listen, this is a pattern for him. He's never there for us when we need him. When the lights went out in the energy capital of the world, he went to Cancun. On January 6th, when a mob was storming the Capitol, he was hiding in a supply closet. And when the toughest border security bill in a generation came up in the United States Senate,
hope this goes without saying, but he didn't answer the question.
We don't have to have a senator like this. Let me be very clear. I believe in physical barriers as part of a comprehensive strategy to secure the border. We had a bill for $20 billion for 1,000 new Border Patrol agents, for more immigration judges, more asylum officers to help us deal with the backlog. I wanted to make sure we passed that. When I'm in the Senate, we will. And we'll also fix our broken legal immigration system. Senator Cruz has had forever, and he's done nothing to solve this problem. Why would we believe that he will with 6 more years?
Senator, you have 90 seconds for a response.
Well, I want to note once again in his entire answer, Congressman Allred made zero reference to anything he's actually done in office. As Gromer Jeffers rightly noted in his question, Congressman Allred has said publicly, if you believe border security matters, he thinks you're a racist. He calls the border wall, quote, that racist border wall, and he has pledged to tear down that racist border wall personally.
Man, it sure would be easier to like stick to those points if the Democrats hadn't like completely buckled and shifted right on this, right? Like Allred could continue to hold up this point and say, yes, like border security is a serious issue, but the idea of a big cartoon wall, erected by a wannabe dictator is like such and such, whatever liberal squawking he would prefer to engage in. But doesn't matter? No, of course not, because the moment Biden was in charge, it's like, oh, never mind. Actually, we would like to build a big wall. We just don't want to dip it in gold the way that Donald Trump does. We know that Mexico's not going to pay for it. That's the real difference.
And he said, quote, we will not have that wall in this country. And by the way, that's been his consistent voting record. He's voted against the border wall not once, not twice, but 3 times. Every single time there's a serious measure in the House to secure the border, Colin Allred votes no. Look, it's a pattern we've seen actually at the presidential level because it's what Kamala Harris does as well. And understand at home, Colin Allred is Kamala Harris. Their records are the same. I've served with both of them. They voted in favor of open borders over and over and over again, and now they are desperately trying to hide that from the voters. Now, at the end, Congressman Allred said, well, gosh, Cruz hasn't done anything
got
on that. Well, let's talk about my
Radagon
record.
situation
When Donald
going
Trump
on.
was president, I worked hand in hand with President Trump to secure the border, and we achieved incredible success. We produced the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. That's what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris inherited. It's what Colin Allred inherited. And they deliberately broke it and opened the border. And Texas is paying the price.
Senator, that's your time. Congressman Allred, in your 60 seconds.
Cruz is unquestionably the better debater here. Just in terms of like delivery, it's pretty obvious, which isn't like surprising. He's always been good at this. He's been good at this for like a decade, like for as long as he's been active in national politics to the level, you know, that he is now.
Second response. Can you address the original question? Yeah. Why was Trump's border wall bad?
Listen,
why is Biden?
Yeah, listen, what I've always said is that we have to make sure that as we're talking about border security, that we don't fall into demonizing. And you can take something out of context from 7 years ago, which is what he's trying to do. But he doesn't want to talk about what he said this year, which is that we don't need a border bill. So I have a simple question for you.
It's not taking you out of... Dude, look at like a Democrat has to run from a correct statement now. You called the border wall racist. No, I didn't. That's out of context. Doug, it's racist. It is. You were right the first time.
Sure.
The $20 billion for 1,000 new Border Patrol agents, for 100 new immigration judges, for 4,000 asylum personnel, to help us have technology to catch fentanyl coming across the border. Why did you not support that, Senator?
It's a great question. Can I take his time and answer?
No, you can't have my time.
But what I'm saying,
you can jump in after me. Yeah, that's fine.
This is
not the United States. I'm not yielding my time. It's fine. It's fine.
Don't ask me questions.
No, I'm going to ask you a question. You can answer when you have
time. They should fight.
But the point is that we had a bill. This is a pattern. He talks tough, but he never shows up. We have a phrase for this in Texas: all hat and no cattle. That's what Senator Cruz is. 6 more years of this? Come on. He's had 12 years to do it already. Give someone who actually will a chance.
Thanks, Congressman. Senator, now you take 60 seconds to respond.
Well, Congressman Allred has memorized his lines well. I will say this, though. He asked, what have you done?
Notice how the drawl has completely gone from Cruz's accent. Like now it's back to like the normal nasally. Oh, you're right. I should put the damn hat on. Pardon me. And I've got my Yeehaw shirt on. Sorry, I don't got a jacket with any fringes on it, though.
We produced the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years, working hand in hand with President Trump. He didn't address that. He also didn't address the fact that it didn't take a bill for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Colin Allred to break the border. It took a president refusing to enforce the law. You know, you can watch and listen to Congressman Allred talk about the border on allredfacts.com. But I can tell you what he also said just a couple of years ago. He said, you know, I don't hear much about the border here in Dallas. It's not a top-of-mind issue. And I got to say, I've represented Dallas and the whole state for 12 years. I hear about it everywhere I go. I hear about it in Dallas. The folks concerned about the Dallas woman who Venezuelan gangs broke into her house, tied her up, pistol whipped her with a gun, threatened to cut her fingers off, and robbed her. I hear about it in Houston from the mother of Jocelyn Nungary, the 12-year-old girl who was raped and murdered by Venezuelan illegal immigrants that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris released. And when you say you don't hear about it, you're not listening to Texas.
You know, I would love it if it could be made law that every time you bring up an anecdotal example of crime without pointing to like a broader statistical trend in crime going up, a shock collar should, like, I mean, a pretty bad shock, like it could do serious damage, you know? It's always like this. It's not like, if you want to make a point about the nature of a type of crime, that's one thing. But if the implication is that crime is going up, unfortunately, my friend, if you look at the numbers, it's actually not. So
that's your time, Senator.
Gentlemen, let's move on to a different topic here. Let's turn to the economy. One of the big pain points for Texans, as you likely know, Senator, is the high cost of insurance. In the last 5 years, premiums for home and auto insurance in Texas have risen faster here in Texas than anywhere else in the country. Some insurers have stopped writing new policies or they limit the coverage that they offer Texans. This has happened in other places like Florida, like California, where climate change is causing extreme weather events. The question, Senator, does insurance need a...
Oh, hold on. Presupposing that climate change is real is bigoted and biased against Ted Cruz here. Come on.
Solution.
Isn't Ted Cruz... Wait, am I misremembering? Isn't Ted Cruz a creationist? He's not just a Christian. He's like a hardcore Christian. Hasn't he spoken? Yeah. He's like, he would deny evolution.
Well, no, it doesn't. Insurance is much better handled at the state level. And I'll tell you, when it comes to inflation, inflation is caused by the policies of Kamala Harris and Congressman Allred. Kamala Harris and Congressman Allred, they came in and they went on a spending binge. They spent trillions of dollars we didn't have.
What does this have to do with...
They borrowed trillions of dollars from China that we didn't have, and they ran the printing presses. What does this have to do with insurance? And I and many others said, if you do this, you're going to drive up inflation. And they didn't care. And I'll tell you, Texans at home are experiencing it. If you're a senior on fixed income, you're finding it harder and harder to pay your bills. If you're a working couple, just buying your first home, you're discovering a 7% mortgage is very different than a 2.5%. If you're trying to fill your tank with gas, or you're a single mom worried about getting braces for your daughter, the inflation caused by Kamala Harris and Colin Allred's spending binge is hurting Texans across the board. And I got to tell you, inflation has in particular been exacerbated by Kamala Harris and Colin Allred's war on energy and oil and gas in Texas. Understand, over and over again, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris put executive orders.
What the hell are you wearing? South Texas Titan, shouldn't you know? It's a damn Bozeman. I mean, it's not a proper cowboy hat. It's crushable felt, but it's definitely in the ballpark. What do you want from me?
Place to hurt energy, and Colin Allred has voted against Texas oil and gas and energy over and over again. He voted in favor of Joe Biden's ban on new permits to export liquid natural gas, and he voted in favor of Joe Biden's ban on new gasoline-powered engines. Starting in 8 years, 2/3 of all new cars have to be electric, and Colin Allred voted in favor. That drives inflation at home.
Senator, that's your time. A lot to respond to there, Congressman.
Sure. Well, listen, I agree that...
Yeah, Allred is getting dog walked. This is a blowout. I don't know if it's necessarily a blowout. It's definitely not good for Allred, though, for sure, yeah. Good thing nobody watches these.
That insurance is better handled at the local level.
Handled? Never mind, it's over. It's completely over. Hold on, I want to get a little more into character here. Let me put on a pearl snap. If you have an issue with this, then I cordially invite you to tell me so through a $5 donation. Or a $10 donation. That's cool. There we go. Now we've got... Now we're ready to pay attention to Texan politics. No, I do not have a bolo tie. One day. Talk to her.
Let's talk about inflation, because, you know,
Benjamin, I'll get to you.
In a state where we don't pay our teachers enough. And so I know what it's like to go through the grocery store line and swipe your debit card and just say a little prayer and hope that this week you can afford it. That's why I've been so laser focused on lowering folks' costs, on lowering the cost of your prescription drugs, on your health care, on your child care, on your housing. You know, we thought it was a good idea to cap the cost of insulin for folks on Medicare at $35 a month. I voted for it. Senator Cruz apparently disagreed. We tried to cap it for everyone because 1 in 4 Americans are rationing their insulin. You know what rationing insulin means?
Indiana Bosch,
you know the medication you need to survive. And so we said, let's make sure that this is affordable. I was willing to do it and voted for it. Senator Cruz voted against it. You know, and it's not surprising. He's also one of the biggest recipients of campaign donations from big pharma.
You look kind of Montana in a good way. This hat's very popular in Montana. You got a good eye. They prefer their proper Texas, you know, cowboy hats down there. But in Montana, they like their Bozemans more, I guess. Not a huge expert on the subject.
Lobbyists in the entire United States Senate. It's true. But this is a pattern. You know, this is somebody who goes to the Ritz-Carlton in Cancun. Do you really think he cares about inflation and about working families? When his entire career, he spent his time trying to cut taxes for the rich and not looking out for working folks. When I'm in the Senate, we'll have somebody who will try to represent all 30 million of us and make sure we keep a focus on lowering your costs everywhere we can.
Congressman, thank you. Senator, you have 60 seconds.
Well, you notice once again, Congressman Allred takes no responsibility for his own voting record, takes no responsibility for the trillions in spending that have driven inflation, takes no responsibility for the question war on Texas insurance and LNG and oil and gas. Instead, what he says is, well, gosh, he's voted to lower the price of insulin. Well, so did I. I voted on the Senate floor to lower the price of insulin to $1 a vial. And you know what? The Democrats blocked that. I'll tell you, President Trump put in a program to put in place affordable insulin. As soon as Joe Biden and Kamala Harris came into office, they pulled that out. You know what Congressman Allred also voted in favor of? He voted in favor of taking $300 billion from Medicare and using it to pay for Kamala Harris's pet project, using it to pay for health insurance for illegal aliens. That is driving up the cost. Just Medicare premiums under Congressman Allred have gone up 20%, and they are projected to triple. I will fight to lower premiums and make health care more affordable and give you, the consumer.
I don't feel like a moral obligation to fact check anything going on here. It should be safely assumed that any time a Republican opens their mouth, they're lying. Like, there's literally no reason to ever trust anything they say. You know, you might as well be like, hurriedly fact-checking something you see in like alphabet soup. Mostly here to assess the vibes and wear a hat.
Greater choice.
All right, let's turn to a topic that's been a hot-button issue in your Senate campaign. Congressman, your opponent is saying in political ads that you refuse to protect the integrity of women and girls' sports. The most recent ad actually came out today. Congressman, where do you stand on transgender athletes in women's sports?
Well, let's be very clear. Let's be very clear about what's happening in this campaign. This is, you don't have to be a former NFL linebacker to recognize a Hail Mary when you see one. This is a desperate, last-second attempt by Senator Cruz to distract you.
Yeah, one of the big issues with Allred is that he comes across way too rehearsed. Like, Ted Cruz is able to kind of, like, break into each of his statements with, oh, you didn't do that, or, oh, you're lying about this. Whereas every time Allred gets pitched a question, he's like, haha, okay, we can do this, Allred. All right. So this is a classic misdirection tactic from Senator Ted Cruz. You know, it's like you can tell that he's got like he just did that right there. It comes across very inauthentic.
Because he can't defend his own record. Listen, I'm a dad, I'm a Christian. Of course I don't support these ridiculous things that he's talking about.
Racist,
but what he wants you thinking about is kids in bathrooms, so you're not thinking about women in hospitals. Because it's indefensible. It's indefensible that we have Texas women being turned away from hospitals, bleeding out in their cars, in waiting rooms, being found by their husbands. So all of a sudden, and this is a good one, all of a sudden, the protector of women and girls is going to be Senator Cruz, who thinks it's perfectly reasonable that if a girl is raped by a relative of hers, a victim of incest, that she should be forced to carry that child to term and give birth to it. You think that's perfectly reasonable, but now you're going to set yourself up as a protector of women and girls? It's laughable. And listen, he's trying to distract you because what can he run on? I've never seen somebody who runs for office on what he hasn't done. He's been one of the least productive senators in the entire country. And you know that. I talk to Texans all the time who say, I can't think of anything Ted Cruz has done to help me in my life. When I'm your senator, I'll keep focused on the issues that matter to you, on lowering your costs, on securing the border, on restoring a woman's right to choose. That's what I'll be focused on.
Senator Cruz, you have 90 seconds to respond.
He's going to tear into
Well, it was striking once again in that answer. He said not a word about his own record. I have to admit, the beginning of it reminded me of Kamala Harris in her debates answering everything. Look, I was born in the middle class. It's some lines that sound nice that ignore his record. Let's just talk about his voting record. Again, you can go to allredfacts.com. You can see the actual votes. 4 times he has come out for men playing in women's sports, for boys playing in girls' sports. He is a co-sponsor, and he voted for a law called the Equality Act. The Equality Act mandated that boys be able to go in girls' bathrooms, in their locker rooms, and their changing rooms. He voted for it. That is his record. Number 2, there was a bill. It was a very simple bill. It was narrowly defined. It was protecting women in girls' sports. He voted no. The only issue on that bill was whether biological boys should compete against our daughters. That's not fair. Congressman Allred was an NFL linebacker. It is not fair for a man to compete against women. The 3rd time, he signed on to something called the Transgender Bill of Rights.
Okay, now I would describe this as dog walking.
And he co-sponsored it, mandated that boys compete against girls' sports. And just 2 weeks ago, Congressman Allred joined 100 radical Democrats in demanding that our military allow drag shows on military bases, pay for
soldiers. By the way, another phenomenal example of what happens if you LARP at being a progressive, but then, like a coward, walk it back and don't defend the points, you know? If you stick up for trans people, you have to stick up for trans people. That pathetic little ad that Allred put out recently where he's like, I don't believe in anything crazy like boys and girls sports. Like, this is what happens. Yeah, that's what you get for being spineless, man. I mean, I still want you to beat Ted Cruz. Like, Ted Cruz is worse on every issue, but, like, that's what happens when you're fucking spineless.
To have sex changes using taxpayer money and pay for children to be sterilized and have sex changes on military bases. Again, that's extreme. That's not Texas, but that is his voting
Senator,
record.
That's your time.
Yeah.
Congressman,
well, thank you.
There's a lot to respond to there. You have 60 seconds.
I mean, you know, it's a lot. And I stand here as a proxy for millions of Texans who are sick and tired of this act. You know, when Ted Cruz starts talking about team sports, you got to watch out because the only position he ever played was left out. And I'm not trying to be mean, Senator, but just sit this one out, please. Listen, I don't support.
You can't throw the zingers.
I don't.
Why'd you vote for
stop. Let me speak.
The highly scripted zingers when you're on the back foot.
And what Senator Cruz should try to explain to you is why he thinks they should. But ultimately, what he's trying to do is a little game called distraction, to distract you from his record of doing horrific things to folks in this state, of abandoning us when we need him most, of not being there when we need him. That's what he's trying to do, and that's why he's spending so much time on this.
All right, Senator.
Romer, I'd like 60 seconds on that.
Well, I have a question for you in those 60 seconds. Parents of transgender youth are worried about the safety and well-being of their kids and say ads like these, like the ones that you are running, are dangerous. What do you say to those parents?
Look, we should protect every child. We should protect every person. I have advocated protecting the safety of every child, of every person, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, sexual identity. Everyone deserves to be protected against violent crime, against discrimination. But Congressman Allred hasn't said that. He hasn't voted for that. He's voted repeatedly. Look, I know a lot of y'all at home, for example, saw two biological men competing in women's boxing at the Olympics. That was wildly
Yeah, wow, we're actually like really going with that. We're still like this point was like walked back. We're actually still doing this. If the moderators don't jump on this, that's like insane. This isn't even
unfair. You know, my youngest daughter plays volleyball.
Get his ass in the lawsuit.
It's not fair for a biological boy or man, a teenage boy, to spike the volleyball ladder, and he has voted repeatedly in favor of that. If you want to see extreme, I encourage you to read the letter Congressman Allred signed. It is on allredfacts.com. You can read it. Don't trust my description of it. Read the words yourselves. You know what he argued for? Military bases should have drag shows and should be able to fly a transgender flag above it. Look, call me old-fashioned.
Sure.
I think the only flag that should fly above our military base should be the American flag.
That's your time, Senator. Congressman, 60 seconds to respond. And if you can, clearly outline where you stand on transgender in women's
He can't because he's a fucking coward fence sitter, you know? This should be the easiest layup in the world. Ted Cruz, you just said biological men participated in the Olympic boxing ring. No, they didn't. It's a fact that they didn't. You're just lying. And it's a showcase of what a danger you are to women everywhere, that you will call women men if it suits your political agenda. You don't care about the sanctity of women's sports. You only care about using it as a dunk so you can target vulnerable members of the population. Like, it's such a layup. Like off the but he's not going to. Behold.
Well, listen, as I said, I don't support boys playing girls sports, but
spectacular. Just keep I'm sure it's the move the ancient Shaolin monks teach you, which is if you're in a fight and you keep ceding ground, eventually somehow you win. I'm not really sure how it works, but I'm told it's a very effective strategy.
Let's be clear about the Equality Act, which was a bipartisan vote in the Congress. It was endorsed by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. For folks at home who don't know what that is.
Okay, I'm 10 minutes behind, but Vosh's fit is giving cultural appropriation. I'm American! What are you? You people. You goddamn jokers.
That's basically the biggest speaking organ for the business community. But the National Association of Manufacturers, this is not a radical bill. What it's saying is that folks shouldn't be discriminated against. But what Ted Cruz wants to do apparently is. But he also, again, just wants to distract you. That's what he's going to do. He's been doing it for 12 years. Folks are sick of it. I hear from you all the time about it. Let's turn the page and let's elect someone else.
Like unbelievably weak. Just incredibly flaccid. Unbelievable. Genuinely.
Thank you, Congressman. Senator, let's move on to January 6th. And question for you. Your own words and statements have changed since January 6, 2021. At one point, you called the insurrection a violent terrorist act, saying anyone who commits an actual act of violence should be prosecuted. President Trump has said he would consider pardoning the rioters. Would you support that? You have 90 seconds.
So, Gromer, thank you for that question. Listen, my view is clear. I think anyone who commits an act of violence should be prosecuted and should go to jail. If you assault a police officer, you should go to jail for a very long time. And by the way, that's true whether I happen to agree with your politics or disagree with your politics. I've spent 12 years fighting to defend the men and women of law enforcement. That's why I've been endorsed by the leaders of organizations, over 44,000 law enforcement officers. That's why I've been endorsed by Kim Ogg, the Democrat district attorney in Harris County. She is the twice elected Democrat, the chief law enforcement officer in Houston. She's endorsed me in this race. Why? Because she wants a senator who will stand with law enforcement, who will lock up criminals and fight to secure the border. And unfortunately, Congressman Allred's record on crime has been terrible. Congressman Allred has voted not once but twice in favor of defunding the police. Let me tell you what a disaster defunding the police had been. The defund the police.
That's true, man. Well, it was a disaster. It led to literally no outcomes in reality. So, you know, Yeah, you listen to Republicans and you get the impression that like every single police department disbanded after the George Floyd protests, you know?
Police movement started in 2019. From 2019 to 2023, let me tell you what happened to the murder rate. In Houston, it went up 29%. Right here in Dallas, it went up 17%. In San Antonio, it went up 57%. And my view, you know, Congressman Allred is happy to talk about those who committed acts of violence on January 6th, but you don't hear him talking about the Antifa and Black Lives Matter riots that burned cities across this country. If you commit an act of violence, you should go to jail, and there should be no political favoritism in that regard.
Congressman, you have 90 seconds to respond.
Oh, that was really something. I have to say, you can't be for the mob on January 6th and for the officers. You can't. And it's not funny, because you're a threat to democracy. Sure. I was on the House floor when we went through the votes. I remember when you objected to the results in Arizona. Y'all at home might remember where you were on January 6th, what you were doing. I know where I was, and I know where he was. I remember when they told us to reach under our seats for these gas masks. I didn't know we had, because they had deployed tear gas in the rotunda. The officers locked all the doors. We barred the doors the president walks through to deliver the State of the Union with furniture that we usually use to hold paper. And I texted my wife, Allie, who was 7 months pregnant with our son, Cameron, and at home with our...
I was told by a Lyft driver in downtown Seattle saying lack of policing is causing issues in the city. Is this true? Do you typically get your info on cities from Lyft drivers within those cities? Is that like the... Yes? All right. Well, who am I? I'm not a Lyft driver. Who am I to contend with that person's lived experience?
Our son, Jordan, who wasn't yet 2. Whatever happens, I love you. And I took off my suit jacket, and I was prepared to defend the House floor from the mob. At the same time, after he'd gone around the country lying about the election, after he'd been the architect of the attempt to overthrow that election, when that mob came, Senator Cruz was hiding in a supply closet. And that's okay. I don't want him to get hurt by the mob. I really don't. This election is his accountability. You cannot just be patriotic when your side wins. If, for the first time in 250 years, this project of ours, this shared American project, that we did not have a peaceful transfer of power, the folks responsible have to be held accountable. That's why Liz Cheney has endorsed me, has got involved in this campaign, and is saying to Texans everywhere, do not put Ted Cruz back in a position of authority, because he's done it once, he'll do it again.
Senator, you have 60 seconds for a rebuttal, but answer the question, would you support pardoning those convicted in the Capitol riot?
So look, I think the Biden-Harris administration has persecuted some engaged in peaceful speech. And if you are being persecuted for peaceful speech, absolutely you should be pardoned. If you engaged in violence, absolutely not. You should not be pardoned. But let me say something interesting.
Quick addendum. Every single person at January 6th was actually just engaging in peaceful speech. Smiley face.
You know, the far left, they're so angry right now. There's so much hatred. You know, Congressman Allred just snarled at me, you're a threat to democracy. Now, let me be clear. I don't know Congressman Allred. I have no animus for him personally. But I do know his voting record. His voting record is radical and extreme. And you want to talk about threats to democracy? Let's take a vote that just happened a few weeks ago.
This is why there's actually no political consequence to being extremely far left in your voting record and your policies. Because if somebody like Allred is getting called extreme left, like, what are you, like, oh no, you can't be pro-Green New Deal. The Republicans will call you a communist, you know, which they would do literally no matter what.
Weeks ago on the floor of the House, the SAVE Act. The SAVE Act provided that in order to register to vote, you got to prove you're an American citizen. Congressman Allred voted no. 11.5 million illegal immigrants have come into this country.
I always have to like asterisk this. If you cast a vote, that vote only gets counted if you are an American citizen. That already happens. The thing, the virtue signaling the SAVE Act is pretending to do, they already do that. That's how it works. The vote that you cast gets checked against the registry of registered voters. Which only includes people who are citizens. It doesn't. And if there's an inconsistency, you get removed from the voter. It doesn't get counted.
Under Kamala Harris and Colin Allred's open border policies, and Congressman Allred votes no to protecting our elections and ensuring that people don't vote illegally. That is a threat to democracy.
Senator, thank you. Let's move on to another topic, gentlemen. Let's shift to foreign policy here. Congressman, you've said you think there is no more practical military goal for Israel and that it can achieve in Gaza. As a U.S. senator, though, how would you hold Hamas accountable for the worst?
How would you hold this like pureed blob of viscera buried underneath a mountain of rubble in Gaza, in another country on the other side of the world.
Terrorist attack in Israeli history back on October 7th of 2023.
Haven't heard of it.
And what military approach would you like to see Israel take at this point in its war?
Yeah. Well, let's begin at the beginning. October 7th was a horrific terrorist attack.
Haven't heard of it.
By a terrorist organization in Hamas, the worst attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. They bear the responsibility for this war. This is a war of choice by them. And Israel has a right to defend itself, and I have always stood up for their right to defend themselves. What a novel phrase. I'm on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I've been on it for the last 6 years, and I was in Israel not long before the attack happened. I visited a kibbutz along the Gaza border called Kfar Asa. While I was there, we shared a meal, and we were also FaceTiming with a Palestinian man in Gaza City who was a father of 4, talking about strengthening ties between Palestinians and Israelis. Kfar Asa on October 7th was the site of what an Israeli general called a massacre. And I don't know what's happened to that father of 4. But I can tell you this, folks on both sides of that fence deserve to have a future, one that's free of this cycle of violence. It's time for us to reach a negotiated settlement to bring the hostages home, to also bring the remains, unfortunately, of the ones who have died in captivity. Hamas must be...
It's going to be like 2036, and Israel is going to be, like, the nukes will have already fallen. Israel and Iran will be duking it out through, like, irradiated tunnels and bunkers, and American politicians are still going to be like, okay, but once this is all over, like, we need to get those hostages back, referring to, like, the October 7th hostages. You know, we're never getting the end of it. They're dead, man.
Be held accountable, and they will. According to the defense minister, Yoav Gallant, they are no longer in a position to be able to pursue an October 7th style attack. But let's also be very clear. There was a vote in the United States Congress to provide aid to Israel, to provide aid to Ukraine, to Taiwan, to help with the humanitarian situation in Gaza. I voted for it. Senator Cornyn voted for it. Ted Cruz voted against it. You can't say that you are for supporting Israel.
So here's a question, by the way. Why would anyone vote for Allred? Except because they don't like Ted Cruz. Like, genuine question. Has he put forward literally anything? Like an aspiration, a set of personal beliefs or convictions, charisma? Like, what, if you are even remotely left of center, what does he have that isn't not being Ted Cruz? Does there need to be another reason? When it comes to motivating people to vote for you, yeah, it's pretty important. He's a knockoff Obama. All right. You know that's just racist, right? He doesn't share any of Obama's mannerisms or even elements of his physical appearance, except for being like, it's just like, I don't understand where you're pulling it from, apart from racial animus. Like, you are making me look bad, and I'm banning you for it. Like, I'm not mad about you being racist because you're just a drop in the bucket. I'm mad about, like, the hit to my image. This just somewhere in the audience, a brother just shook his head and walked away. You need to do better, all of you.
To defend themselves when you vote against that critical funding.
Congressman, thank you. Senator, same question for you. What military approach would you like to see Israel take at this point? Multiple fronts are opened up right now.
Well, thank you, Jason. I will say this issue is one of the clearest differences between Congressman Allred's record and my record. When I was elected 12 years ago, I resolved then to be the leading defender of Israel in the United States Senate. And I've worked every day to do that, to stand up and fight to support Israel. I am proud to stand with Israel. Our position should be that America...
YouTube chat. Another one just did. Well, you miss every shot you don't take.
Stands unshakably with Israel. When President Trump was president, I urged him to move our embassy to Jerusalem. He did, and I was there the day we opened the embassy in Jerusalem. I've never seen such celebration. When President Trump was president, I urged him to pull out of the disastrous Iran nuclear deal. He did, and it was the single most important national security decision of his entire presidency. Congressman Allred has consistently lined up against Israel. At the beginning of the Biden-Harris administration, he urged them to send money to Gaza, even though it would go to Hamas. He has supported Kamala Harris and Joe Biden flowing over $100 billion to Iran. 90% of the funding for Hamas and Hezbollah comes from Iran. I'll tell you, Congressman Allred invited a radical imam here in Dallas who calls Zionists monsters and has compared them to Nazis. Congressman Allred calls them the very best of North Texas. I don't support those who engage in anti-Semitic actions, and I will tell you the funders of the anti-Semitic protest on college campuses are among Congressman Allred's biggest supporters. We need clarity. We need to draw a line, and as for me and my home, we will stand with Israel.
Senator, thank you for that. Congressman, you have 60 seconds.
We have to talk about this because there was a vote. It's not about talking. It's about action. We had a vote in the United States Congress to provide military funding and aid to Israel, to Ukraine, to Taiwan, to address humanitarian issues in Gaza and around the world. Part of that aid package was $5 billion in the interceptors that were used in the Iron Dome to prevent the Iranian rockets that just rained down Israel a couple of weeks ago. That happened in spite of Senator Cruz. It was a very illuminating vote because the extremists were the ones who voted against it. The far left voted against it. The far right voted against it. I think there was only 18 senators who voted against it. And said Cruz—
Nothing but like immense joy on my part with the knowledge that like we're having a suck-off competition right now. Like it's declaring your fealty to Israel is just a component of every political debate now. It's like, well, how much are you pro-Israel? Oh, I'm like super duper pro-Israel. I would kill myself for Israel. Oh yeah, I'd kill my family and myself for Israel. Thanks, that's great. Thank you both. A compelling debate between two, you know, Christian American politicians, one of whom claims to be America first and the other of whom claims to be a liberal.
Cruz was one of them. So you can't tell me that you support Israel when the rubber meets the road and you're not there. But let's also be very clear. We have to find a negotiated diplomatic settlement to many of these issues. And that is what I'm going to try and contribute to when I'm in the United States Senate.
So I need 60 seconds to respond to that charge there.
Yeah, liberals will make fun of Aaron Bushnell for self-immolating, and then the entire Democratic Party will self-immolate for the opposite position, for support of Israel.
Now,
did you vote for it?
Well, let's actually get into it.
You voted against it.
So, Congressman Allred is right that there was a bill that was on the floor of the Senate, and I opposed that bill. Why? Because I said at the time that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to flow money to Gaza and give it to Hamas, but they're going to freeze weapons to Israel. That's exactly what they did. And after that, the House of Representatives took up a bill to provide emergency weapons to Israel, and Congressman Allred voted no. Understand, every single time Congressman Allred, right now in this debate, he is echoing the calls of the enemies of Israel saying, ceasefire now. He claims there is nothing else to be done militarily. I'll tell you, when Israel—
That's just such a wild thing to say. His words echo the evil of our enemy, saying stuff like, we need peace. Yeah, maybe in hell, bucko. He's chanting the same phrases of evil that you hear being screamed in the streets of Tehran. Peace now. Stop killing children. Disgusting.
Detonated the pagers against Hezbollah. It was one of the most targeted and effective military actions we have ever seen. Congressman Allred is proud to be supported by J Street, the radical left organization that undermines Israel at every level. And I got to say, listen, that's dangerous. Right now, Kamala Harris and Colin Allred both want to vote.
This is like the 5th issue Allred has run up against where he can't have any position because he and the Democratic establishment are completely spineless. It was the same with like everything else, like particularly with the defending transgender people, but also with this. He has like no affirmative position. It's literally just like, how much do I agree with the position of my opponent? Is it like diet reactionary or is it full committed reactionary?
Of the anti-Semites on college campuses. I don't want their vote. And if they threaten Jewish students, they should be arrested. They should be prosecuted. They should be expelled.
Senator,
and if they're from another country, they should be deported.
Senator, that's your time. But let's stay right here. As you mentioned, you have been a strong advocate of Israel's right to defend itself. But the World Court has found it plausible that Israel has committed acts that violate the Genocide Convention.
That's anti-Semitic.
Do you think Israel bears any responsibility for the civilian deaths and humanitarian crisis in Gaza? You have 90 seconds.
I think that
then he just says for 90 seconds, no! Just hold the note. He's got a big barrel chest. He's got the lung space for it.
there is no country on earth that fights a more humane, a more targeted, a more just war than the people of Israel. The World Court
Gotta turn me into the damn Joker. I like it's just it's not like they really do hate you. They really do. They don't care about you. I mean, obviously, but still. I'm gonna turn into the woker. That's right. They literally just piss on your back and tell you. They piss on your face and tell you it's raining. It's fucking crazy, man.
And the International Court of Justice is filled with anti-Semites. They repeatedly attack Israel over and over and over again. And I'll tell you, I've got real experience there. When I was the Solicitor General of Texas, I represented the state of Texas before the U.S. Supreme Court, fighting against the World Court, and we won a 6-3 victory because the World Court was trying to attack Texas just like it's trying to attack Israel. Listen, Israel goes...
Remember a year ago when people were insisting this was an insignificant topic no one would care about? Yeah, I think I'm allowed a little bit of pettiness because the world is an unceasing march of cruelty and pain. So I need to take joy where I can. So the genocide of the Palestinian people and the, like, as I mentioned before, self-immolation of the Democratic Party to defend Israel in spite of all common sense, reason, and morality, that's all pretty bad. What's good, though, is that I feel a little bit smug about every negative thing I said about this ending up being correct. If anything, I understated the case. Like, I was pretty down on all of this from the get-go, like on October 8th when Israel started firing back. But if anything, I could have been like far more. I mean, I said pretty much from the beginning, like, this is the genocide, like, we have ticked into the final state. They've been wanting to do this for decades. But I should have been like more hyperbolic, I guess, because, like, whatever. Look at how it turned out. I think you've done your best. Thanks. I hedged my bets.
Number one, it deliberately targets military targets. I mentioned the pagers before. I've never seen a military action that was actually the leadership of Hezbollah who decided who would get these pagers. And you had to be just enough of a psychopathic terrorist that Hezbollah wanted you on that pager. That's who detonated. It was precisely targeted. You know, Israel, when they go... Hezbollah, the military group that effectively runs half of Lebanon, only hands off their nondescript pagers to the most sinister of their terrorist organizations. It's like a trophy, you know? All the, like, children and civilians who had one and stuff, like, they were all, like, the highest ranking warriors of Hezbollah. That's true. What's up, Sake? When they see, for example, military operations in a building, they send text to all the civilians there. They drop leaflets. They drop what's called a knock bomb on the top that just makes a noise to tell civilians clear out. There's no other nation that goes to the steps it does to avoid civilian casualties. You know who's responsible for the civilian deaths? Hamas, because they use human shields. And let's talk about records. I introduced legislation to sanction Hamas for using human shields. That legislation passed into law.
I don't have to like debunk anything, right?
One of the 101 different pieces of legislation I've enacted, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris refused to enforce.
Israel's currently doing like a knock famine where they starve all the Palestinians to death to warn them that they're going to starve them all to death. It's very humane.
That law, they will not sanction Hamas, and Congressman Allred will not stand up to that.
That's your time. Congressman, does Israel bear any responsibility for civilian deaths and a humanitarian crisis?
No, literally no responsibility, even though they've killed an uncountable number of people. No, none whatsoever. Literally, like yesterday, they fired chemical weapons at the UN peacekeepers. But no, like, nah.
Listen, I will agree with Senator Cruz.
That's cool, man. Whatever. I didn't come to this with any hope anyway. You can't take from me anything.
That Hamas is a terrorist organization that hides amongst the civilian populace. This is part of their battle plan. They anticipate and want civilian casualties. They put their tunnels beneath playgrounds, beneath elementary schools. They do this knowing that they make it more difficult to then target them without it causing civilian casualties. No one in Texas or across the country should shed any tears for Hamas. What we can do at the same time is have within our hearts...
Didn't Israel build most of the tunnels? Yeah. And doesn't Israel, like, non-stop strike areas that have no Hamas targets? Yeah, but, like, who cares?
Capacity to say that we want to prevent unneeded civilian suffering. And that is something that I've always believed, that we can separate. And we've done this our entire history as a country. This is what makes us great. It's what also makes democracies like Israel great, is that we can
Currently run by a war cabinet, by the way, full of fascists, just like we'll be soon.
Can separate the terrorist leaders of a group from the people who are being subjected to that. And so, to me, what we have had to keep our focus on is trying to provide as much aid as possible to innocent civilians in Gaza, to make sure that children are not being unnecessarily targeted. This has to be our responsibility. This has to be the Israeli responsibility. And that's something that I'll continue to work on in the Senate when I have a chance.
All right. Thanks, Congressman.
Do I get 60 seconds?
Yes, that's...
Yeah, can I have 60 more seconds to suck Israel off, please? My America First agenda isn't complete with 60 more seconds of me talking about how they're the most moral military in the world. It genuinely is crazy. They don't even say, like, oh, Israel is a great ally of ours and complies with our standards of humane behavior or whatever. They have to say, no, they're actually the greatest in the world. Phenomenal stuff.
We're going to move on, to...
Senator, we have...
I thought it was 90, 96.
Yes, this is... I apologize. Here we got off track. Yeah. You have 60 seconds to respond, sir.
You know, again, Congressman Allred did not address his own record, and that's a pattern at every level. You can go to allredfacts.com, and you can see his votes. You can see his vote against providing weapons to Israel. You can see the letter Congressman Allred signed. He joined with over 100 left-wing Democrats at the beginning of the Biden administration saying, please send money to Gaza, even though it'll go to Hamas and be used for terrorism. And by the way...
That's what it said in the letter. Please give it to Hamas.
I led 19 senators in urging the administration do not send money to Gaza because it will be used by Hamas for terrorism. We now know how Joe Biden and Kamala Harris resolved that. The administration concluded it was, quote, highly likely that the money would be used by Hamas for terrorism. But you know what they did? They sent it anyway. They waited.
Bosh, I want to vote for Kamala, but I'm feeling really bad about it because of Gaza. What should I do? I mean, you should pat yourself on the back, you know? You've done it. You've solved the moral conundrum. By removing yourself from the situation, you're now absolved of any outcome in it. I'm sure the Palestinians are... If they were here with you now, they would be like, thank you. I mean, what do you want me to say? Obviously, Kamala Harris is better than Donald Trump. I mean, you know, like, if you're feeling bad about it, you know what life is about? Suffering. That's what life is about. You think you were put on earth to enjoy the pleasures of the Garden of Eden? What are you, a hedonist? You are here to suffer, and then you die. So go to the ballot box.
U.S. anti-terrorism laws. When it comes to records, you know, you didn't hear anything Congress Allred has done. What I have done is, as I said, authored and passed 101 different pieces of legislation, including legislation targeting Hamas. They should be sanctioned, and I stand with Israel that they should destroy Hamas.
Senator, thank you. Sorry about that just a moment ago as well. Let's move on to another issue here. It's a pocketbook question, something you mentioned earlier tonight, Congressman. You said while you were at the grocery store as a child, you'd swipe the debit card. And
I'm sorry, why does it seem like Vosh randomly has something appear in his mouth? Because there is a cough drop in my mouth. I feel a little bit sick. You might be also seeing my tongue. That's also in there. Just covering all bases.
Say a little prayer, you and your mom. Since the pandemic, though, food prices have soared 25%, as everyone in the studio knows here tonight. Senator Elizabeth Warren and other Democrats, though, wrote to President Biden to use his executive authority to lower food prices. Since you did not sign that letter, what is your idea to bring down food prices?
Yeah. Well, listen, as I said, this is personal for me. I know exactly what it's like when the cost of anything goes up. I mean, I know what it's like to be dead broke, and to hope that something comes along so that you can get through that week. And that's why I've been so laser focused on controlling Texans' costs and lowering them everywhere I possibly can. One of those...
It really is, like, genuinely... I know it's a Dem consultancy thing. I wonder who this language is for. Like, come on. Who's convinced by this? You can't sell the, like, oh, I'm authentic, I've been there, when you come across this inauthentic. Why is Vosh all yeehawed up? Texas Senate debate.
This is the child tax credit. For 6 months, it was in place, and it helped us lift millions of Texas kids out of food insecurity. You know, the North Texas Food Bank told me that they could track when the child tax credit hit folks' bank accounts because need for their services would go down. We wanted to extend that.
Why do Dems always try to win over Republicans when that has never fucking worked? By the way, I have a question, okay? Like, genuine question. Is there someone in the upper echelons of the Democrat consultancy space who is so wildly, like, anti-Hispanic that they won't even consider dumping money into fielding Hispanic candidates in areas where they would obviously do really well. Can somebody please explain to me why there's not like a 65-year-old Mexican grandmother who's running for Senate in Texas? Like, genuine question. Like, why not? Like, come on. This would be such a layup, dude. Because of Cuban voters? It's Texas, not Florida. Texas.
It was the right thing to do, to lift kids out of food insecurity. But Senator Cruz opposed it. When I'm in the Senate, I'll bring back the child tax credit. I'll also make sure that we cut taxes for the middle class. This has been a tough time for the middle class. We have to make sure that we're alleviating their tax burden. And I'm going to invest in a new generation of housing to make sure that we can increase our housing supply and lower the overall cost of housing. This is something that has to be a national priority. And when I'm in the Senate, it will be.
Congressman, thank you. Senator, how do you lower food prices?
Well, let me briefly address the child tax credit, because that was an integral part of the 2017 Trump tax cuts that I spent hundreds of hours working on, fighting for, and supporting, and that Congressman Allred opposed. The Trump tax cuts worked incredibly well.
I want to be clear, I was being sincere. Thank you for your advice. I mean, I didn't really offer advice. I mostly just projected my suffering onto you. Look, Trump's not going to be any better on Gaza, okay? The Democrats have, as I said, they've self-immolated. You know, like, the Democrats are complicit in this to the fullest possible extent, in an electoral sense and with regards to supporting Israel. But they're better than Trump. That's all it is. It's sometimes it's like an informed simplicity thing, you know? Oh, you know, maybe there's a more intelligent, progressive way to approach this where I don't have to... Nope. Nope. Sorry. Hispanics in general are energized by strength, and this works against the strategies of DNC consult. You know what I think it is? I think it's because the DNC doesn't want to field and support any candidates who they don't think will bow the knee to the New York Dems. And there are lots of black voters and constituents and politicians who are very much in line with establishment DNC values, because black people in America are like the strongest base for DNC support. And a lot of them aren't really that progressive. They're like conservative old DNC. And whereas Hispanic people on average aren't necessarily more progressive, but Democrat voting Hispanic people are on average more progressive than white or black Democrat voting groups. So I think they're worried that they might get like a, you know, not to invoke a stereotype, but a bit of a firebrand. You know, you pump up like a Hispanic character for the Texas Senate, and they're like, actually, I'm seceding from the United States. I in line with my progressive agenda, I am returning Texas to Mexico. It could happen.
Well, we saw the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years, the lowest African-American unemployment ever recorded, the lowest Hispanic unemployment ever recorded. We saw real results. Now, the Democrats this past year, what they wanted to do with the child tax credit is they wanted to relax the work requirement for parents. They wanted parents not to have to go work. That's a mistake. We need parents to get back to work. Now, your question was about inflation and food. Listen. Kamala Harris and Colin Allred have undermined our farmers and ranchers every day. I'm proud to be endorsed by the Texas Farm Bureau to fight for the farmers and ranchers in Texas. They put bureaucratic regulations that make it harder and harder for farmers and ranchers to survive, but nothing hurts more than the cost of energy. Listen, whether it is the natural gas that goes into fertilizers that they use to farm crops, or whether it is the diesel in their tractor or the diesel in the trucks bringing food to the stores, the energy skyrocketing prices are the result of Congressman Allred and Kamala Harris's war on Texas oil and gas. Congressman Allred voted for billions of new taxes on natural gas. He also voted in favor of Joe Biden's ban on liquid natural gas, new permits, and he's voted in favor of Joe Biden's ban on new gas engines. Starting in 8 years, two-thirds of all cars have to be electric.
Senator, that is your time. I want to redirect the question, though, to families like yours years ago. Yeah. How do you lower food prices here? Your name wasn't on that letter for the president to use executive authority. How do you do it?
There are some times where there is price gouging going on, and we have to have the agencies that are responsible for that looking into it. But it's also true that some of these supply chain issues and consumption issues from the pandemic are still ironing themselves out. But let me be very clear about something. I opposed Joe Biden's pause on LNG exports. In fact, you don't have to just believe me. You can go read the op-ed that I wrote in the Houston Chronicle opposing it, saying it was the wrong thing for Texas energy, that it was also wrong for our national security, because while we're trying to wean our European allies off Russian gas, you know what was replacing that? Texas LNG. And so I want everyone out there to understand that I will be a defender of the Texas energy economy, that I'll grow it in an all-of-the-above way, and that what Senator Cruz is telling you is simply not true.
Senator,
I need 60 seconds to that because he directly responded there, and what he said was false.
Senator, we don't have time. We want to get a few more topics in here in our final minutes, here, please.
But hold on.
Let it
give me
end.
30 seconds then. Give me 30 seconds because he illustrated what I said at the beginning.
Time on the next question.
Difference between talk and action.
Senator, we need to move on. You can address it in the next question here, sir.
Yeah. Let's change topics, Senator. Both of you say you believe in protecting access to fertility treatments like in vitro fertilization. But the process effectively ended for a while in the state of Alabama after a state Supreme Court decision there. If both Democrats and Republicans agree on
crude oil is so cheap already. Yeah, it's genuinely insane. Did you see that BBC article? All wildlife population down 73% since such and such or something like that. Like, we surveyed the entire planet and it turns out it's all a graveyard everywhere. Like, we're down to 1/4 of the life that there was before. Like, in general. And then you hear Republicans, Donald Trump's one policy is drill, baby, drill. Well, apart from putting a 1 billion% tariff on everything. And then you look at our crude oil production and it's like, wait, hold on a second. We've literally never made this much before. Like, it's so cheap, but it doesn't matter, right? Because... oh, yeah, here we go. Wildlife numbers fall by 73% in 50 years. That's cool. Global wildlife population shrunk by an average of 73% in the past 50 years. Not a big mosquito fan anyway.
on protecting IVF. Why hasn't it happened?
So it's a great question. It's very important. I'm going to get to it in a second because I do need to respond to what Congressman Allred just said before. Which is, you know, I said at the outset there's a difference between words and actions. If you noticed on LNG, what Congressman Allred said is, well, I wrote an op-ed about it, and it's true. He does claim he supports LNG. But when it came time to vote, there was a vote in the House of Representatives, do you support Joe Biden's ban on new permits on LNG? And Congressman Allred voted with Joe Biden. He voted against Texas jobs. By the way, in South Texas, there's an $18 billion new LNG export terminal struck down by left-wing judges, the kind of judges Congressman Allred supports. That cost 6,000 high-paying jobs in South Texas. This is an agenda where his record, yes, his words sound good, but his voting record, remember, his first 4 years in the House, he voted 100% with Nancy Pelosi. He didn't deviate on a single vote, which meant he voted against oil and gas and Texas jobs repeatedly. All right, IVF, incredibly important topic. I am the author of legislation that would protect IVF as a matter of federal statutory right. I joined with Alabama Senator Katie Britt to put a clear protection of IVF. I strongly support IVF. You ask why it hasn't passed? Because Democrats, very cynically, they stood up and objected. Why? Because they want to campaign on the issue, and if my legislation had passed, it would be unequivocal in federal law that IVF is protected for every American, and it is Democrats who blocked it.
Senator, that is your time. Congressman, IVF, 90 seconds.
Well, listen, you know, if Senator Cruz is telling you something that doesn't match with what you're seeing from others, then it's probably because he's lying. I was named by an outside group the most bipartisan Texan in Congress. This is something I've worked at, not just in an election year, like he's trying to change his image in this election year. I've done it over the course of my 6 years in Congress. Let's talk about IVF. Because IVF didn't need protecting until he got his way of going after it. No one was thinking that we needed to protect IVF until he was singularly responsible for pursuing, by putting in place judges at the district court level, the circuit court level, and Supreme Court level, folks who would put at risk this miracle technology. And you know what? It's not just that. When he ran for president in 2016, he supported the personhood amendment. You know what that means? That would make something like IVF illegal. It would also ban certain forms of birth control. You did. You did. When you ran for president in 2016. You can look it up, folks.
Fundamentally.
You don't have to believe me. Again, you've been seeing him lie to you for 12 years.
Make the debate end how much longer. Dude, I'm suffering with you. It's not like I'm enjoying any of this.
60 seconds for a rebuttal.
Well,
we're here to suffer.
You can watch the debate on the Senate floor where I tried to pass strong, clear federal legislation protecting IVF.
I'll move ahead a little bit.
So I with Nancy, like Nancy Pelosi.
question here. We're almost out of time. You can respond to the next question.
Let's get to it quickly.
I want to ask you this question. Kamala Harris, Congressman, she wants to give $25,000 in down payment assistance to people wanting to buy their first homes. She's also proposing a $40 billion innovation fund to build more affordable houses in Texas. The question tonight, do you support those?
Okay, so let me just address the bipartisanship thing, because over 70% of the bills that I've co-sponsored over 6 years have been bipartisan.
Imagine in this environment bragging about working with Republicans.
You know what? The U.S. Chamber of Commerce is another group you might have heard of, Senator Cruz. Infrastructure. And I want to talk really quickly about that, because there's a bill to bring $35 billion to Texas over 5 years. The bipartisan infrastructure.
In the House, Congressman Allred has authored and passed 3 pieces of legislation. 3.
Be clear, Congressman, do you support the initiatives that Kamala Harris is proposing, the $25,000, the $40 billion innovation fund?
Yeah, well, to be clear, I think we have to start with the housing supply before we get into anything else.
And how do you pay
divisive senators in the entire country? If you don't like how things are going in Washington right now, well, you know.
Are we done? Are we free? Thank God. I don't care about watching it. Holy shit. Well, good thing nobody watches those. Hope Alred wins. Because he's better than Ted Cruz. Oh, man. Sake, thank you about the 20, or thank you for the 20 gifted tier 1 subs. Unfortunately, Cruz does one thing I wish any Democrat would do. Connect the presidential candidate and the party ideologically. I mean, genuinely, like, Democrats have walked back so much over the past 4 years, over Biden's term, that they, like, it seems like most of what they have to do now is pretend they didn't say more progressive stuff, like back 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. You know, at least with the Republicans, they can more or less stand by the reactionary positions they have because they're still reactionary. You know, they still have those positions. Like, they lie all the time, but there is a consistent ideological through line. Well, that was miserable. Oh, yeah, no, Cruz is no lightweight when it comes to debate, Annie, for sure, for sure.